Change podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert and I am here with my regular co-host Robert Pye. Say hello, Rob Pye.
Hi both, good morning.
We are excited to have with us today Shasha Khan, who is local to Rob, a Green Party councillor at Reigate and Banstead. But most excitingly, I think also a chess coach is something I discovered, which I think is a brilliant thing to be.
Yeah.
So, Shasha, please do tell us where it all started for you.
When you've just asked that question, I was thinking where it all started is probably, can I go back to before I was born, maybe, when my
That would be
dad,
a first,
my
but yes,
dad,
please do.
in 1965, my dad used to work for the East Pakistan Tourist Board. And whilst working there, his manager came up to him and said, you know that they're calling for people from the Indian subcontinent to come to the UK. What do you think to that idea? And he thought about it for 24 hours and he thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. And like, it was just a crazy idea. And not many people thought it was a good idea. His immediate brothers and sisters thought, you a bit, really? You want to do that? Okay. And he then sorted himself out and then he came in 1965. I've heard this similar story with other people as well, where they arrive at the airport and then they get a taxi. So my dad had a fiver in his pocket, or £5. He got a taxi to where he was supposed to go, some connection that he had, that he was going to stay at their place. And he, when the taxi dropped him off, he gave him some change back to my dad. And then they kind of looked at each other. My dad didn't realise he had to tip him. And then obviously the taxi driver wasn't very happy about that. And he called him a 4-letter P word. And that was the first experience of racism my dad had in this country. And I think he said, he politely said he should go back to his own country, back to the country he came from. So it all happened really quickly in terms of the first experience of racism. But then, my dad is just, he's a bit of a maverick in that respect. He doesn't really, he goes for things, and then he carried on. And then my mum, he was married at the time. Then my mum came over once he'd settled and got a job and all the rest of it. And then I was born 7 years later. That's how it all began.
That's and I think I was born in 1966. How the world has changed. I mean, racism and lack of opportunity hasn't gone away, but it surely is better than in 1964 or 66, whenever it was your dad came across.
Yeah,
surely it's better.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably changes. It's like it almost feels like a problem that will be never solved, because if we live in countries and live in silos and live in our own context, then people outside of that, this sort of the other box, it's always going to be difficult to integrate the different stories. And in fact, in that sort of intergenerational, Annabelle and I did some work up in Bradford, and it was looking at first, second, third, almost fourth generation of immigrants. It was, I think, it was Asian or Bangladeshi, English cotton mill, Bangladeshi, yada yada, and then up to the current day, Eastern European. And so if you speak to a number of the Bangladeshi, it's like, this community used to be absolutely fantastic until those Europeans arrived, and then it's like, because this is our town, and it's like, so you talk 10 years or 20 years, another 20 years, that sort of it changed. Still there are silos, and in Bradford we remember being taken to different blocks of flats where it was Eastern European, it was English people who, white people from the cotton manufacturing of the industrial age, but they're not really integrated. It's a great dream that we could be borderless and integrated, but there's still quite a bit of work to do. think
Yeah, a little bit.
we're better. We're better. Go on
Yeah.
then, Annabelle. Where do you want to go next? I'll leave it to Annabelle.
So that's pre-birth. Always good. So what about you? Where was this all, Shasha, and what was your childhood then like, I guess?
So we lived in North London, a stone's throw away from White Hart Lane football ground in Tottenham,
So
Tottenham
are you a
Hale.
Spurs fan?
No, I'm not.
Really?
I ought to have been, but then my best friend was a Man United fan, so I followed him, and I was a Man United fan. But then, when we moved to Croydon, when I was 11, to South London, I kind of like didn't really follow a football team strongly, but I was always interested in football. And then a friend of mine said he was going to go to the Palace versus Charlton game when
Proper old
Charlton has started ground sharing with Palace, and they were, and it was my first experience. So I became a junior member for £1, and then I went into the ground for £1, and we stood at the front of the Holmesdale end, and right next to us were the Charlton fans. There was just like a partition, and I was thinking, this is really scary. And there was a lot of violence that day. Actually, some Charlton fans got into the Crystal Palace end, and it was just. I was just so pleased to get out of the stadium alive. It felt really, really, but exhilarating. Wow, what an experience! And Palace won 2-1. And at that point, I thought, wow. I kind of said to myself, I could easily support Charlton or Palace because I haven't got an affiliation with either. But I said to my mate, look, if Palace win, I'll support Palace. If Charlton win, I'll support Charlton. And Palace won 2-1. And the rest is history. I'm
Great.
now going to Palace games whenever I possibly can. I'm not a season ticket holder, but I went to about 3 games last season, maybe 4 actually, yeah. And then started watching the women play as well, which is great.
So I've got three boys, all quite grown up, or young adults, and 2 of 3 are Palace supporters because like one's Arsenal, so he's defected. And I want to put on public record that Palace have actually won a few games recently.
No, let it be known.
It's like after a stretch of like what seemed like an infinite number of losses, they've won several quite spectacular matches. So
exactly, yeah.
That's football, hopefully out of the way. But
okay, so then after the football, so football's always been, to be honest, football. I love football, and I've loved the other interest I've always had is music. And so I went to university and then got into the music scene there, dance music scene. It was kind of like in the early 90s, there was this tail end of the second summer of love and underground parties and so on. So I got into that kind of scene and then came out of university and started a nightclub promotions outfit with my friends from university, which started off in a house party in Kensal Green, then another one in Stockwell, and then it moved to the Garage in Highbury in Islington, a club there. And then it just grew from there. And then by 1997, 98, we were recognised by Time Out magazine as one of the top 10 nightclubs to go to, parties to go to in London. So from the back of that, I used to do a bit of DJing, but most of my job was promoting. And all the money we raised from receipts we gave to charities. So we gave to established ones like Amnesty International and even Liberty. And then we gave some money to the Liverpool Dockers, also to the Big Issue. Also Reclaim the Streets, who were very active at the time. And I got to know even though it's like a very, there was no kind of hierarchy to Reclaim the Streets. There wouldn't be, but I got to know the organisers of, protests. And one day I remember they took over Brixton. I mean, it was just an unbelievable experience. The whole roads was closed off, and a van drove in with a massive sound system, and everyone had a massive party. Some people put down loads of sand down in the middle of the road, and a giant sand pit emerged, and all the children played in the sand and did sand castles and all the rest of that. And shortly after, the criminal justice bill came in, and that stopped all of that from happening ever again. So that was what it was like. But it was an exciting time, and it carried on with the music, and I started a record label. But then at university, I studied politics and economics, and I was always had an interest in governance and good governance. And I always I went to protests and things like that. And then so the Green Party bit started really unexpectedly in 2003. I became super conscious of this ridiculous thing that was going to happen, was that it was going to go to war in Iraq on a false pretext, or and you could argue that oil was the was a kind of like a contributing factor why we were going to do this, and obviously on the coattails of the Americans. So I just marched with 1.5 million other people on, I think it was February the 13th, 2003. And the very next day, when I saw Tony Blair said, great that we live in a democracy, unlike those who live in Iraq, who are under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, who can't do anything like this, and we're entitled to protest. But he just continued with his plan to invade Iraq. So I thought at that point, change needs to come. We got a bad, it's so easy to be so toe the party line and that sort of thing. And you just got to go for a different type of politics. And I recognised the Greens were certainly different in their kind of principles. They would look at war as a last resort. They certainly, the connection came into my mind about how if we could reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, then we can also live sustainably using solar power, wind power, tidal power, whatever type of alternative renewable energy. Then we can actually wean ourselves off our dependence on oil, and then the next war. And so I joined the Green Party in 2003, and it just so happened at the time there was a kind of a gap in the. So when I turned up, I joined in the Croydon party, but there was no Croydon party. So the local party was in Sutton, London Borough of Sutton in South London. So such was how small the party was. There was no party in Croydon, so went to Sutton, into Carshalton in Sutton, and met about 6 other people having a meeting. It was really, to be honest, it was a really quaint affair. It just seemed like they were just like talking. It was a social club, really. It wasn't anything more than that. And we were talking about, the state of something locally, and then a couple of meetings later, there was discussion about, well, there is a London Assembly election coming up, 2004, the mayoral election, and we need to find a candidate for the constituency of Sutton and Croydon. And one of the, I think the chair or the treasurer suggested that I should put my name forward. And I was like, what, really? This was not planning to do. And I talked it over my wife or girlfriend at the time. She said, yeah, why don't you have a go? And unbelievably, I won the selection process, and then I was candidate in 2004. And I've just continued ever since being active. It's just sometimes I am driven in that way that I feel I'm able to make change. And I've been involved when I was involved in Croydon actively in the Green Party. I kind of like built the Croydon Green Party up, and now they have 2 Green councillors. So, but I moved from Croydon in 2016, and then was, to be honest, I was kind of thinking, wow, I can relax about my involvement in electoral politics, and I can just be just similar. Can I say that, Rob? Similar to what you were recently, like a paper candidate, not really just put my name down, not doing any campaign, because local parties tend to focus on winnable seats, target seats, and so on. And where I lived wasn't necessarily a target seat in the north of the borough, but then the neighbouring borough of neighbouring ward of Hooley, Merstham and Netherham became a target ward, and I was asked to put my name forward, and then I won the selection process, and I went for it, and I got elected in 2023. It was so almost like 20 years after joining the party. I joined, and when I was a member in 2003, there was not even 30 or 40 councillors across the country. There were only 2 councillors in London. It was just a completely different. And it's just so pleasing that the Greens have just managed to grow organically, if you like, and not had any like I don't know, some major campaign issue like a Brexit or a referendum to just boost their poll. It's just been growing and growing from grassroots. We keep into our principles, and it's great. I'm just thrilled to be a councillor in Hooley, Merstham and Netherham. Very proud and privileged and honoured to be the councillor in Hooley, Merstham and Netherham. And thankfully, the efforts I've put in has been recognised by the local electorate, and they voted in the next Green councillor in 2024. So, and the party has locally grown from 11 to 13. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, and my ward, which is Shasha's ward of Merstham, Hooley, Netherham, has 2 out of 3 councillors who are Green. So
Yeah.
sort of it. Well, and I mean, I didn't know this. I mentioned in a previous podcast I became a member very recently of the Green Party. But it's not just about green. There's social justice
Yeah.
and the well-being. It's almost bigger than the green bit. So point number one, it's sort of like green. It's not just about the environment. It's about people and what's happening in communities. The second thing that I was just blown away with was how anybody in a community, members of form the policy bottom up, and then there is a process for that to bubble up nationally. So it's not like you appoint a king or a ruler or a prime minister and then you lose all ability to influence the direction of the party. The direction of the party is constantly sort of bottom up, and that's something that I think we've totally lost in politics, in the what I would call the mainstream Labour Conservative. You vote a king, a ruler, a prime minister,
Yeah.
and then you kind of give up and go, okay, well, he just tells me what to do now. She, they, them. But actually, what happens to the grassroots? What happens to the people and the fact your dustbins aren't being emptied, or you planning permission, or property development, or whatever. And that's what keeps the Green Party together. But I also think it's a bit of an issue of the Greens of how do you actually bubble all of that stuff up to get a one voice? Because if you put all of those voices together, the Greens would be actually much more dominant in terms of the national media. If you, like you're saying, Shasha, you count the councillors. People in where I live probably don't know that 2 out of the 3 are Green. It's a bit hidden, but it's coming together. And in a very Tory constituency like Reigate and Banstead, where we live,
Yeah.
the Greens are quite a force.
Funny you should say that, Rob, because you're saying about the leadership issue. It was a big issue back when I joined the party. We didn't have a leader. It was part of the principles and the founding principles of the Green Party. They wouldn't have a leader. We would have principal speakers, and 2 of them as well. And so that no one would be defined as a leader, because we didn't want to have this. Because when you introduce the idea of someone as a leader, then they would start instructing, and then this will be a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. So I think there was, I remember it very well actually, because I was kind of working in the party headquarters at the time. Some senior members and some councillors got together and said that the elephant in the room is that the media just laugh at us, saying, well, you've got what's a principal speaker do? And then you have to go into the explanation, and there's your media time gone just trying to explain why you've got a principal speaker. So it was decided that we would have somebody as a leader, use the name as a leader, but they wouldn't have the powers of a leader, and just that there'll be a regular member on the executive. And that met a lot of apprehension from a lot of long-standing members. It kind of, you either in either camp really. One is you stick to your principles, or one you just conform to what mainstream media requires you to do. And it was a big decision, and to lots of people happy. And I think it was a turning point actually, that we had a leader and a deputy leader, and Caroline Lucas, who's just phenomenal, the single Green MP. And very influential, and such a powerful speaker. And whenever she appeared on TV, suddenly, when she appeared in Question Time, the membership would boost ever so, and because she was so powerful and spoke so eloquently and just hit the right notes with so many people. So that's why, it was a good thing to have a leader. And I think that was a turning point, actually. We became a proper party. I mean, when I was knocking on doors back in 2003, 2004, people didn't recognise that the Greens were actually a party, and they can say, are you Greenpeace? No, Green Party. And they kind of had to explain that, like you say, Robert, we just simply not focused on the environment. We're not a pressure group. We've got a full breadth of policies covering all issues, and so we've just come. It's great. It's come a long way in the 20 years I've been involved.
So Annabelle wants to ask about chess. I want to ask about youth work. And Annabelle, go on. What are you?
I just want to say I went to uni in London. I was born in 1971, so I'm a year older than you. So, but I was there, but I was never ever cool enough to go to the garage.
Oh, right.
I'm an indie kid.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I look back and regret now. I wish I was cooler, but I wasn't. But anyway, but yes, no. I mean, I just love the fact that you coach chess. I mean, I'm all for just expanding all children's options, opportunities, and chess is like quite a learned activity. I'm just interested in how you got into that and how that manifests in your life.
Yeah, so again, it's just, like most things just happen accidentally in a way. So my mum taught me how to play chess when I was 6, and that was it. I played against her, and then when we went to Bangladesh, where my parents are from, when I was very young, so at the age around 10 maybe, especially where both my mum and dad were living in the villages in the north west of the country, their family was from, that they didn't have TVs, so they would just have every house would have a pack of playing cards, a chess set, and something called a carom board, which is like an Indian version of snooker, where you have a board and you flick discs, and that was the pastimes sorted. And so everyone played chess. So I ended up playing chess a lot there, and realizing I was actually quite good at it. But then I was able to hold my own and playing my uncles. And then I didn't do anything more after that. And then when I was 14, I went to a Purley Boys School in Coulsdon, and they had a chess club. So I turned up to chess club and found out I was the best in the year,
Yay.
unexpectedly. So I've been like, wow, I'm actually quite good at this. So then went on to be the school captain and so on. And but then when I went to university, there was no chess club at Wolverhampton University where I went. and then but I was one of the things that my friends and I did do was play chess late at night when we came back from, and we just loved doing that. We had a few games of chess, and then didn't do anything more after that. Again, just dropped off, not really interested. And then when we moved to in 2016 to where I live now, just in Reigate and Banstead, just over the border back in Croydon, I hadn't realised that where, just literally about 15-minute walk from where I live is one of the biggest chess clubs in the whole of the southeast of England,
Wow.
Coulston Chess Club, and I never knew it existed. So I went along thinking, because normally what happens is that I do this quite a lot actually. If I move somewhere or do something new, I start to look and afresh about all the things I can do, and think, right, I'm going to reset here and do new things. So I thought, right, I'm going to join the chess club. I joined the chess club, and then just haven't. This was in 2017, and I've continued being active and playing for teams there. And then a couple of years ago, I saw. This is a long-winded story, but a couple of years ago, I did see an article about how there is now a prison chess world championship, and there is and the organisers were a charity that have taught prisoners in this country to play chess, and they've noticed the benefits of prisoners in jail actually spending time to play chess. And I got in touch with the charity, and they said, yeah, we've got two options. One is you can go to schools and teach young people to play chess, or go to prisons. But first we have to do the coaching on how to do schools coaching. So I went to that training, and then I did pass the training, and then I got my roles, and I've still got offers for doing prison work, but I'm so enjoying coaching primary school children playing chess and seeing how they're improving. And that I think that there is this thing, and the research is showing that chess has lots of benefits to young people, to everybody. I mean, it helps boost concentration, logical thinking, strategic thinking, memory, focus, concentration. It just the benefits are endless, and it's and headmasters and headmistresses and are starting to realise that. So there's a huge demand for more and more coaches to do after school clubs in primary schools, and also I'm doing a secondary school in Sutton as well. So I'm really enjoying it. It's just a great experience.
And my youngest son, Shasha, I think he went to the Coulston Club because that's where they run competitions, with the
Yeah.
sort of everything. And he's definitely there, his chess club coming for the competitions once or twice a year. That just loads of kids, and they're just all competing against the clock, because you've got the chess clock.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Just incredible. And he did it for a few years, and so I think it was your club that he went to. I'm pretty sure it
must have
was.
been.
Yeah, it must have been. So then I want to ask. This is another. So we're sort of darting. You didn't mention that you've been a detached youth worker, and
Yeah,
I think that's quite special, because youth work used to be something that local governments funded, and it was about engaging with young people and finding out what young people wanted, very much from their point of view. But a few years ago, all of that funding was cut as part of this sort of collapse and they've had to find their own way as charities to find the funding. It's been very
yeah.
difficult for them, but it's one of these magical um, interventions, quite difficult to measure in some. But to tell us about your youth work, what was that? How did that come about? What's the story? I really want to
Right.
capture.
So at the time I was working for my father's business. I needed to help him out a little bit with his business. So it was a tough gig actually. The business. It was a hotel up in Northamptonshire, and my kind of like energy was draining doing something which was most of the time negative in terms of dealing with various issues to do with staff and so on and customers. And then it was just a tough experience. But anyhow, I decided that why not put my name down to be a volunteer mentor for young people in Croydon. And I had a couple of young people that I mentored. One was a refugee and a unaccompanied minor from Afghanistan, and I got to know him. I mean, he had a horrific childhood, and then coming here was a horrific story. Wish more people get to hear stories like this firsthand. So I got to know him, and then I realised I quite enjoyed being a mentor, even though I sometimes feel that I'm a young person myself. But at the time, yeah, it was 20 years. I was only I was 30, but I thought, right, okay, maybe I can do this. So I saw an advert in Croydon Council for a detached youth worker, applied for the role, got the job. And so I didn't know what a detached youth worker was, but it was quite a novel thing to do. And already, obviously, there was the strains on budgets was there back in 2008. This was, and so a new idea, a new model of youth working was where the youth worker would not be working out of a youth club per se or a youth centre. They would be the resource. The individual themselves would be the resource, and they would go out to where they would get there would be the knowledge from local. So there could be something like a joint action group where the local police are meeting local councillors and council officers, and identifying areas of concern where young people are causing antisocial behaviour. And so one of the solutions was to send a detached youth team to those areas. And, it might take time to get to even see a handful of young people who are causing the problems. But, it might take 2 or 3 visits of wandering around in an evening in your jacket, which says detached in big letters on the back. And you had a hoodie, I had a hoodie, and we wouldn't look authoritarian, like an authority figure or anything like that. It would just look like, and out of curiosity, young people might come to us. And we were working down in Kenley, which is south of the borough of Croydon, where there was some problems with antisocial behaviour at a co-op there. And we just started to hang around and got to know them, and then started to engage some young people. And then you can signpost them to things that are going on. But more importantly, as you pointed out, Rob, you just ask them, what are you interested in doing? What would you like to do? The money, there was pots of cash available, and we found out they didn't really want to go to youth clubs because they were just like places that are not really cool. You don't want to be seen there. And they just wanted to find, maybe we just find, I think at that time we managed to get an offering for them what they wanted to see in the youth club. Similarly, there were some major issues at the time in around 2008, 2009 of gang crime and knife crime in Croydon. There were some gangs around, and so again we were other teams were involved with, and I assisted as well, where we just tried to engage with the gangs and young people involved in the gangs, and just again just brought them back into a bit of you could argue that 1 or 2 of the youth workers ended up being maybe a role model for them, for young people that there was an absence of maybe a father figure, and it was just really, really, really useful thing to do, and certainly a tool to be able to take on all the issues that come with poverty, social poverty, delinquency, and so on. It was just really effective. And I know since 2010, about 80% of all youth services in the country have been cut. So it's just a loss, a huge loss of an effective way to be able to to improve young people's lives.
Wonderful, very moving story. I just wanted to make sure we got that story, because it seems it seems to us with what we're doing in the Commons Fund that so much of the work that you do and you've done, doesn't really have a business model that can, in a world where we've got a cost of living crisis, how do you afford to do what you've done, to do that now when there's so many stresses and so little money to do that because everybody's squeezing the money? How do we keep the social fabric, families, communities, caring, giving, listening, politics? In ancient Greek time, that was called work. We now don't have a definition of work that includes most of what your story's about, because it's like, well, unless I'm an employee, being paid per hour to sell iPhones or do something, then it's not called work. The Greeks would call that labor. They would call work being a father, being a parent, being a brother, a sister, helping the community. That requires lots of love and lots of care.
Yeah,
So it's an amazing. Your story is just fascinating. I love your story. It's probably
I'm just
go on.
wondering how those kids who didn't want to go to the youth club, I sort of get that. There's always going to be people who are too cool for the youth club. I went to the youth club.
oh, no.
But in
You're cool. You are cool, Annabelle.
no, I gave up trying when I was 45. I learned to live with it. No, but recently, didn't we hear? In Rob, you mentioned you might have. Yeah, Adidas and Stormzy opened a new centre in Croydon, didn't they, for youth engagement? Isn't that right? Do I remember hearing that story
Yes, I
right?
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A whole new centre. Maybe that's more cool uh, in this day and
Yeah,
age than a youth
yeah.
centre.
But also working with the police on violence reduction in different areas of the country, um, speaking to a number of people that were sort of on the edge or, in fact, much too close to criminality and drugs and dealing and that, wouldn't go near the benefit system or DWP. It's like, well, I much prefer to sell drugs than do that because, it's not cool to get on benefits and fill in this form and that. It's like, I
Mm.
don't
I
need
don't
that
want
to
to
get
tell the
money.
system about myself. Yeah, is the
I don't.
barrier, isn't it? It's like they know.
It's almost a system that humiliates. So it's like rather than empower or helping people do good by themselves. Wow, what an incredible podcast! I just we're conscious of the time. Have you got anything to tell us in terms of what's next? So Reigate and Banstead getting a majority Green council. Is it politics? Is it work? You involved in some local youth work, fundraising? I know, but what's the next year? Where's next? I'm sure we're gonna read about you, hear about you. What do you want to do? And what would you
Well,
say? So just two
yeah,
questions in one, because
yeah.
then I'll just. So what about you? And then how would you encourage people to get involved? Because I think that's so somebody listening to this, it's like, wow, he's great. He's done all this, but what could I do? What could the listener do to get out there and get more involved? So two questions. What are you going to do next? And would you advise
Mm.
people in terms of getting involved? Tough questions.
Yeah. So for me personally, this coming year, actually tomorrow is an interesting day, Rob, because it's the first full council meeting at Reigate and Banstead, and so mathematically, it is still not clear what's going to happen because if you add, there are 19 Conservative councillors, there are 13 Green, 4 Lib Dem, and 2 Labour. and that equals 19 as well.
Wow.
And there are
Stalemate.
7 residents association councillors as well. I understand that they are determined to stay independent. So it'll be interesting to see over the. It might not happen. Nothing might not happen tomorrow, actually, because tomorrow's full council meeting is largely ceremonial, where you get to see this 48-inch mace being paraded to, warn anybody to do anything. Don't do anything naughty, otherwise you get hit with this thing. So, and then the sergeant at arms carries that through. You can watch it online tomorrow, Rob, if you like, to see what happens. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. But then this year was an election year, parliamentary election year, general election, and I've been selected as the parliamentary candidate for East Surrey, where you live.
Wow.
So I'm standing for election, which is going to be another jaw-dropping experience because it's a tough gig. Done it a few times already in the past. I stood in Croydon North 3 times before. So that'll be hard because this can be hard because I've got 2 children now, my job, and I'm a counsellor. It's just going to be another thing to add to the equation, but I'll get through it. And
So you're going for the MP seat then
I
in
am, yeah.
Surrey, not Reigate and Banstead, but which
Yeah, the
one?
East Surrey. So the thing is
East
that
Surrey.
the 2 constituencies are Reigate and East Surrey.
Right.
Crispin Blunt is the MP for Reigate, and East Surrey's constituency MP is Claire Coutinho. Now, your Hooley, Merstham and Netherham ward used to be in the Reigate, but it's now been switched over after boundary changes to the East Surrey constituency.
Oh.
So logically, I mean, I'm the only Green councillor in that East Surrey constituency because it's moved over, and most of it is in Tandridge, and there aren't any Green councillors. So I put my name forward logically because it'd be good to have an elected councillor as the MP candidate for MP. So I put my name forward, and I won the selection. So that's what, for me personally, is going to happen. With regard to your more harder question to answer, I mean, how do you get people involved? I mean, I think it's I feel that it's really hard for people to get involved. People do have desires to be able to support the community and do something which is not actually kind of like determined by a financial gain, by a reward, financial reward. People like to do things voluntarily for their own well-being. Like I think I've mentioned to you in the past that there's a tremendous amount of people who continuously go out in Merstham litter picking, and I've joined the litter picks occasionally, and it's young people are on it as well. I took my 6-year-old last time actually, and that she loved using the litter picker. They're a really exciting thing to use, and it's quite she really enjoyed it, and so it's. Do you know so many people do things that we're not aware of already, actually. And what's their reason for doing it? I think 2 things. One is if they have the time available, because with the pressures of life at the moment, we have to earn money to pay our rent, mortgage, and get food on the table, and what have you. All the other pressures that we have. It's difficult to find time to do anything else. But the other thing is to remind people it is so rewarding for your own for your own welfare and well-being, really, if you can do something which is just supporting the community. The slightest thing. I mean, like I think that my children have been involved in sports clubs locally. And when you join a sports club for children, you come across volunteers who are organising it. They're giving up their time, and sometimes it takes a lot of effort. You just run a football team.
Yeah,
or a
or
cricket
massive,
team.
massive football, and massive, massive. Yeah.
You such a commitment, and there's no reward for it. And these are the unsung heroes. These are the people we should get in CBEs and OBEs and so on. Not the ones which are mates of the Prime Minister, and so if I can be political like that, who are giving a £5 million donation or whatever they did. So it's just this is there are unsung heroes, and I feel that a lot more people would get involved if they had a lot more time. I really feel that.
Wonderful. So Shasha for MP. That's what we need to make happen between now and the next election.
Yeah.
Here we go. This is the official launch for you're into Parliament. Wouldn't that be incredible? Wouldn't that be
Wouldn't
amazing?
it? And my friends wouldn't stop laughing if that ever happened.
Yeah. We're behind you. I am anyway.
Okay.
Annabelle, any last words, questions?
Thank you very much for all
Yeah, I
that.
love this interview. It was really good. I hope you can spread it to 1 million people and use it to launch your campaign for getting into Parliament. And I wish you every success, and want to thank you for what you're doing, which I think is
Thanks.
unsung. So hopefully, a little bit of this is to sing some of your praises as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye now.
Thank you as well for inviting me on.